If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so honored today, truly honored today, to have PJ Simmons on with us from New York City, New York. Welcome to Green is Good, PJ.
Oh, thanks so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, PJ, before we get into any questions or anything, what we love to share with our listeners, both here in the United States and around the world, is your journey. And we want it to come from you because your journey is absolutely fascinating. Not only are you a Fulbright scholar, not only were you a leader at the Clinton Global Initiative, not only are you the co-founder of the Corporate Eco Forum and also the co-author of the Green to Gold Business Playbook, which just came out, we're going to talk about today, but your journey is one of the most fascinating sustainability and green journeys we've ever heard of. So we want you to share, how did you get to where you are today, and how has that journey been?
Oh, John, it's a very nice introduction. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be talking to you guys, and I'm such a big fan of all the work that you've done, John, too, so really an honor to be here. I guess the quickest way to answer your question is that many years ago, when I was focused on international affairs as an undergraduate at Tufts University and just embarking on a career in that sphere, I read Al Gore's Earth in the Balance. This is back in 1992. I was heading off to graduate school. And it really was kind of like somebody took a 2x4 and smacked me over the head. I just couldn't quite believe that I had made it through an education at one of the best institutions of higher education in this country without anybody really impressing upon me how connected environmental issues were, natural resource scarcities, all those kinds of issues, were connected to all the things that I had studied at college: economics, politics, security, human health, on and on. And so, in retrospect, I think what happened was I kind of said, I had this epiphany that there were all these connections to these things that were so important to the quality of life for people and for our economies and our security and so forth. And in retrospect, I think a lot of my career has been about trying to help get environmental issues out of this green box that we tend to put them in, and into the mainstream, and see all these connections, so that one day we're at a point where it's just natural that we consider environment in virtually everything we do. And that's really been at the heart of my journey and why it's taken many twists and turns. But I've worked in the nonprofit sector, I've worked in foundations, I've worked in the think tank community, and have been really excited to be working with business over the last 5-6 years.
That's so great. And you co-founded the wonderful Corporate Eco Forum, and now you're the chair of it. Tell us a little bit how you started it, why you started it, and who's really involved with it.
Well, a gentleman by the name of M.R. Rangaswamy, who's become my closest collaborator over the last 4 or 5 years, was a friend. We had a mutual friend through the Clinton Global Initiative that put us in touch. M.R. was at a point in his career where he was contemplating retirement or doing something that would kind of really connect to his values and make an impact in the world. And he, had been running around in Silicon Valley with the likes of Vinod Khosla and Ray Lane and a lot of folks who were interested in clean tech and clean technology, clean energy and so forth. And he was really intrigued at the possibility of doing something to try to promote and accelerate innovation in clean energy, clean technology. So a mutual friend put us in touch, and he said, "I'd love to do something." And my first reaction was, "Well, I'd love to help you, but there's an awful lot of stuff going on out there that's really kind of amazing in this space, so I'm not sure how much value add there would be, and I certainly don't want to reinvent any wheels, so let's just take some time and figure out whether there's something we could do that would be helpful." And we spent about 6 or 8 months interviewing a lot of senior executives at predominantly Fortune 500 companies, and one of the things that we heard repeatedly was that there was a need for a kind of safe space, a trusted space for very senior executives to peer-to-peer talk about the journeys that they were taking to try to drive sustainability and environment into the hearts of their businesses, and the challenges they were having, the war stories along with the success stories, and do that in a way that was, the cameras were off, they weren't sort of constantly trying to, tout all the great things that were happening, but really talk about the challenges as well. And that was really the heart of the idea of the Corporate Eco Forum, to provide a trusted community, a safe space for those private conversations, just peer-to-peer of how's it going, how can we share our best practices in a way that's non-competitive, and how can we together accelerate the spread of best practice, and also explore what one of our founding advisors, C.K. Prahalad, urged us all to do, which is focus on next practice, the kind of what are the best practices that are emerging for the next several years. And that's really what's been created. And John, you got a flavor of that last week in Washington. We were so glad to have you there.
Well, I was so honored and humbled to be there, because I'll tell you what, it was probably the best conference in my 7 years with our recycling company and being in just a little part of the sustainability revolution. It was truly the most relevant conference I've ever been to, and I was just amazed at how you put it together. You and MR crafted it and had the interactions among all of us. So again, my hat's off to you, because it truly is something that's so special and so desperately needed. There's such a void in the marketplace. I think you hit it out of the park.
Oh, thanks so much. And I think the only reason that it's worked so well is that at the core of the strategy has just been to simply listen to what our members. We now have 80 companies that are members of the Corporate Eco Forum, combined revenues of $3 trillion. So it's an awesome network of executives and companies. But really, the heart of the strategy has just been to listen to what they are having challenges with, what they really want to talk about, and build agendas and build the structure all around that, and be very highly nimble and adaptive based on what they need at any given time. So that's really been the core of the strategy.
Well, the one thing that I'm still I don't understand about you, PJ, because you're just an amazing superhuman individual, is how you and MR put that amazing conference and continue to keep it going, and you had the time to talk about what we're going to talk about next, to do the Green to Gold Business Playbook with Dan Esty, which is the follow-up to the sequel to Green to Gold. Tell us a little bit why you and Dan got together and did this, and who's it really for?
Well, John, I wake up every day really motivated to try to make a difference and move the needle on these issues. That I sort of see what's happening, the rate and scale of change globally on environment, and I see how that will impact our lives, our children, our grandchildren, supply chains, and on and on. And just really riled up to try to make a difference. So that was really the motivating force. And I had actually been a big fan of Green to Gold, the first book by Dan Esty and Andrew Winston that came out in 2006, which, as you know, was the book of the meeting at the World Economic Summit, and it really made a huge difference in changing the conversation internationally about environment and business, and really helping to recast these issues as kind of core business strategy issues and not philanthropic ones. And it really kind of pointed out the four key benefits for companies that want to try to go green or greener. One being reducing costs, a second being reducing risks, a third being growing revenues and having new sources of revenues, and a fourth being building brand and other forms of intangible value. So it had made a really compelling case. I was a big fan, and I think Dan really wanted to do a sequel. Andrew had already been through this once. I think was pretty exhausted by after the first book, and so Dan needed a partner for the second one. And because I had been focused at the Corporate Eco Forum in trying to keep cataloging all the best practices and what was working, what wasn't working, trying to kind of be a pack rat of all the tools and resources that are out there for companies that are trying to really drive this into the hearts of their business, I kind of felt like it was a natural opportunity to pull a lot of that stuff together and get it out to even wider audiences to have a bigger impact. And that was really the goal of the book, is to take this compelling argument of why companies ought to put environment sort of squarely in their business strategies for competitive advantage, and then move even further in providing practical guidance in terms of the how, and really structure that in a way that was relevant to a chief supply chain officer, to a chief information officer, to an office manager, to somebody that is working in logistics and transportation, to somebody working in finance, all different parts of what makes a company tick. All those different job functions, to try to lay it out in a framework that would be relevant, and it wouldn't have to be read cover to cover, but it would just be a really practical resource for companies that really wanted to figure out how do you go about getting strategic advantage from driving green. So that was kind of the motivation, and it was a really tough tough couple of years to try to balance it all, but I think ultimately very rewarding.
Well, I'm holding the book in my hand, and for our listeners out there, this is a must-read. It's not only an amazing resource, but also you could upload it on your iPad right now, or you could buy the book, and I suggest everyone go to the website, www.greentogoldplaybook.com. It's a beautiful website, lots of information there on how you could buy it, both on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Borders, or like I said, just upload it on your iPad and you don't even have to carry it around. It's right in your hands. This is very important. Listen, PJ, you have such a visibility into so much that's going on in the sustainability revolution, the green revolution. Can you share with our listeners some of the most interesting takeaways that you learned during the process of writing this book?
Sure. Well, I think at the heart of my own learnings in the last several years and working on these issues is that ultimately green in business is really it's a mindset, and it's a mindset that's more rooted in common sense than anything else, and it's really about using a different lens to approach business planning and problem solving that leads you to get rid of waste in all its forms: energy waste, water waste, waste of inputs, raw materials, all those things that when you get rid of those wastes, it saves money. It's about the common sense actions that you would take to anticipate and head off all sorts of risks that you might not be apparent to you if you didn't have a green lens. Right. But when you use it, you can kind of look a little bit further into the future and safeguard your company against those risks that can be, as BP could tell you, or a lot of other companies that have actually been stung by those risks. Can really make a huge difference. And at the same time that all of this is going green is not really a business panacea. It requires the same kind of hard business approach, strategic approach that you would take with any kind of business decision, and that's really fundamental to our approach in pulling the stuff together in the book to say, look, each one of these plays that we talk about in various parts of your business may not make sense given where your business is today, and given your culture, given what you specialize in, and so forth. But it does lay out a range of things for you to test and try and figure out what is going to be most relevant to you. But I think really kind of a big takeaway is that ultimately the pressures behind all of this are not going away. That the idea that green might be a fad in businesses, I think, is being put to rest as people see that the fundamental drivers are really only intensifying. Right. Energy prices, growing scarcities of critical resources, increasing demands and expectations of stakeholders and watchdog groups and regulators, and global competition, even in clean tech. All of these things are combining for increased pressure for businesses to go in this direction, and with that, lots of increased opportunities for businesses like yours to come in and actually solve a lot of these problems that we will continue to face in the years ahead.
PJ, can you also share a little bit on the fallacy that being green or going green costs money, that you actually save money and it's good for your bottom line when you go green as a big corporation or even a small corporation?
Well, John, you put your finger on one of the reasons why I think a lot of companies aren't doing more in this area is that perception of, wow, this is really costly. I think part of that's a mindset. People they instead of thinking of this stuff as an investment that might produce greater returns on investment, they think of the upfront costs, and they have the sense that it's too much and we're not going to invest in it. But what our book tries to do is point to the hundreds of examples of companies, large and small, that have made even modest changes that have required very little to almost no upfront costs, and have produced lots and lots of returns that are really, really attractive. And then lots of other examples. We sort of divide each of our plays into basic, intermediate, and advanced plays. So the basic plays, many of those are very low cost or even no cost measures that companies can take, and that are, quote, green, even if they're not even companies may not call them green, but they may actually produce benefits to the environment and huge benefits to the company. But in the advanced plays, there are companies that actually will really make capital expenditures choices, or they'll make larger investments up front that might not be as attractive compared to some other lower cost investments, but over the long haul, in terms of returns on reducing operation expenses and all sorts of other benefits, that they can have huge payoffs. So, if you look at examples in buildings and facilities, there have been tremendous success stories where companies have gotten really fast payback and big returns on investment from modest upgrades and investments in the areas of lighting, for example, in heating, ventilation, air conditioning, insulation of the buildings. The Empire State Building, which, I know, John, you're originally from New York, and I'm based here in New York.
Right.
They invested about $20 million in eco-efficiency renovations and retrofits recently, and those are projected to save about $4.5 million annually and cut energy use by 38% with a payback in about 3 years. And that's the kind of thing that we're seeing hundreds of examples, as I say in the book, of those types of activities in supply chain and logistics, in information technology, in just sort of basic office activities. It's really exciting, and I think that when you see the examples of companies large and small that are getting those kinds of returns, that's what gets chief financial officers to take a second look and reframe this as to, this is going to be really expensive up front, to, wow, this might be a really good investment for us to look into.
So besides the bottom line, as you and I know, there are also other benefits to the brand, intangible benefits. It's not just dollars and cents. There's branding advantages and other intangibles. Can you also pull some examples out of your amazing book? And again, for our listeners who just joined us, we're so honored to have PJ Simmons from New York on with us. He's the co-author of Green to Gold Playbook. Please go to his website, www.greentogoldplaybook.com. Buy the book, upload it on your iPad. Talk about, PJ, some of the intangible benefits that come besides just cash and money to the bottom line.
Sure. Well, the one thing I will want to add to that is that in addition to all those cost savings, there are lots of companies that are really boosting their revenues and changing the way that they innovate by using a green lens. You have companies like Procter & Gamble and Clorox and GE that have developed huge revenue goals around eco solutions and products that are driven by green. So, those are really exciting. The book has a lot of those examples as well. But on the intangible side, when we talk about intangibles, it's the idea that green efforts can actually create a lot of significant business benefits that are important drivers of future earnings and shareholder value, even if they aren't easily measured or accounted for on traditional financial statements. So here we're talking about brand equity, improved customer satisfaction and loyalty, improved license to operate, reduced operational burden and burden from interference from regulators, stronger ability to attract and retain top talent, which is incredibly important, innovation capacity, and so forth. And when you think about the kind of the amount of a company's reputation that might be not just based on its ability to generate revenues, but it also might be based on all sorts of other factors. This is one of those areas where increasingly a company's performance and environment and social issues, is really making a difference. And one of the examples that I, often think of in this area is Walmart. If you think back to the time that Katrina hit, at the time Walmart was really getting hammered on all sides, from environmental groups, from social groups, labor issues, and so forth. And when Katrina happened, the CEO at the time, Lee Scott, galvanized the culture to kind of respond in a very compelling way to get its employees to come together and try to help address a lot of the relief efforts that happened around Katrina. And at the time, he said something along the lines of, this is our company at its best, and what if we were always at our best like this? And that was just about the same time that Walmart started really investing in a different approach to thinking about how green affects virtually everything it does. And today, fast forward several years, you can't go to a conference or read a book about business and the environment without seeing Walmart all over the place. The transition in terms of its reputation, has been fairly stunning. And there are companies that are much smaller, like the New Belgium Brewing Company, which is a craft brewery based in Colorado, that has really motivated its workforce by embracing sustainability as part of its corporate identity. And their company's executive team points to green initiatives as a source of increased employee satisfaction and a key reason why they have a retention rate of their employees of 95%. And
Wow.
that's really fueled the firm's rapid growth between 2003 and 2007. I think their compound annual growth rate of 13.5% was almost double the craft brewery average. So, you get companies like that really see how much employees can get excited about a company that stands for something and that really puts green at the heart of what it's trying to do. Interface Carpet Company is another one of the examples that I'm sure many of your listeners know very, very well, with CEO Ray Anderson, that has set really exciting goals about having net zero impact for that company that's really galvanized its employees. So lots of intangible benefits as well.
You're right, and so when you listen, PJ, to all that you're saying, both tangible and intangible benefits, why aren't all the companies out there, big and small, running for the door? What are the obstacles? Are they just the legacy fallacies that exist? If there is a great case to be made, and you've made it in the book, that you could do well and do good both at the same time, why isn't the revolution even moving at a faster velocity? Why isn't sustainability moving, even much faster than it is right now?
Well, I think in many cases, if you just think to how many of us have everything that we have on our plates every day in our jobs, and the fact that many of us feel as though we're doing the jobs of 3 or 4 people increasingly, everybody's so busy, everybody's overextended, and if you think about, if you don't already have access to information that's readily available, if it's not really easy for you, if you don't really know much about this, quote, green stuff, if you're responsible for supply chain and you've got to worry about products getting put together in the right place at the right time, in the right quantities and condition, at the right price, you've got all these things on your plate, to sort of add green on top of that, if you don't know exactly what to do and what the benefits are going to be, you're going to be resistant. I think it's a very common experience in a lot of cultures where folks are skeptical, and they should be, because as we point out, not every green play is going to pay off equally for everybody. But that said, I think the good news is that companies that do invest even a little bit of time in thinking about this stuff end up finding huge benefits. And one of the keys that we point to in the book over and over again is just how when you empower people within the company to kind of look for opportunities, and you just give them some examples and you give them some tools, some basic tools to start looking, they are the ones who are on the front lines to sort of uncover the ideas, the opportunities, and to be creative and solve a lot of the problems. And GE, for example, has done this brilliantly with what it calls energy treasure hunts, where they kind of let loose thousands of employees, in plants and in buildings and so forth, and kind of go and look for places where there are lots of energy savings that could be had. 3M has something called the Pollution Prevention Pays program, the 3Ps program, that saved $1.5 billion in the last several decades by engaging employees and looking for these kinds of things. But again, I think that to your question, John, it's just sort of natural for folks that are overextended to kind of be skeptical at the beginning, and I think that's a big challenge. Another one is lack of financing to cover upfront investments. I think, right, particularly for smaller companies, and that's another area where in our book what we try to do is point people to incentive programs and in some cases new banks or new parts of government agencies that actually could help in those types of situations. And then finally, I'd say a fairly unpredictable policy environment has also kind of prevented a lot of companies from dipping their toes in this area. We haven't, particularly around energy issues, there's been a lot of sort of back and forth. There's a lot of differences in state approaches to regulation without a lot of sort of common federal framework. And a lot of companies are sort of saying, well, let's take a wait-and-see approach. We don't have a clear price on carbon. We're not sure where energy costs are going to end up. So that also helps, I think, in some cases, companies sort of resist doing any major changes, given that uncertainty.
We're going to do something different today, PJ. This book, your book, is so important. Mike and I are so, thrilled with the work you've done and the hard work you've put into this. We want to now offer to our listeners, we're going to give away 5 signed copies to our international listeners, the first 5 international listeners that write me an email, tell me what they're doing in the sustainability space and why they want this book at jss@greenisgood.fm, jss@greenisgood.fm, and the first 5 listeners in the United States that also email me under the same request. We're going to also give away 5 signed copies to them. PJ, unfortunately, we're down to the last minute or so. We're going to always invite you back here whenever you want to talk more on all the great work you're doing, both with your book and at the Corporate Eco Forum. Do you have any last thoughts for our listeners before we have to sign off?
Only, John, to say thank you for your leadership and your leadership by example, because I think you're one of those people who has actually, really seized the business opportunity and has gone after it in a way that is really represents how entrepreneurial spirit, around these issues can lead to great business results, and also really contribute to problem solving on a really large scale. And it's that kind of leadership that I see all the time when I talk to people in small businesses and large businesses that, is a constant source of inspiration for me. And, while the challenges that we face are really huge, I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by, your listeners, and really look forward to hearing some of the emails that come back to you and what people are working on, and, what they're inspired by, and hope that I can stay in good touch.
And we're gonna also announce those winners sometime early in the fall. And we're just so, again, humbled that you came on our show today. For our listeners out there, again, please go and buy PJ's great book, www.greentogoldplaybook.com, and Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Borders, and all great bookstores in your local area. PJ Simmons, the planet and our environment are blessed because of your amazing work. We are lucky to call you a friend, and as one of the leading visionary leaders in sustainability, you are truly living proof that green is good.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's such an honor to be here. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
This program will be available for downloading in a couple of days from our station's website, keyword podcast. Thanks for listening, and join us again next week at the same time for another edition of Green is Good.